Wow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's webinar with our guest, Dr. Alan Bergquist, and I'm super stoked about today's topic. We are slightly 1 minute behind, but mostly because I just love catching up with this man, and because y'all know that my love language is numbers, and I'm just really excited about this topic. In case you are not familiar with Dr. Alan Bergquist, he is the founder of Chiropractic Compliance Solutions and serves as their CEO and Director of Business Development. He built a successful practice in Northeast South Dakota and then expanded to multiple clinics in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa. Now, you know somebody must love practice if they have more than one practice, and then they spread it out over multiple states. He turned his focus towards coaching and consulting other doctors to build successful businesses and realized early on that processes that doctors weren't following the rules of the game, that any success would be temporary. So he became a certified medical compliance specialist and a certified professional compliance officer and a certified professional coder. Now he has become an expert in documentation, coding, and compliance, as well as revenue cycle management, specifically related to chiropractic. And, you know, your bio just really doesn't do justice to the depth of knowledge that you have on those topics. And for those of you who are not familiar with that lengthy list of letters that go after his name, I can tell you, as somebody who only has certified professional compliance officer, that when you're going through all of that, you're not learning just about chiropractic, but the rules of all things in the medical field when it comes to coding and compliance. So thank you so much, Dr. Bergquist, for being here today, for sharing that knowledge, and again, for teaching my favorite topic of discussion.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. It was great to catch up with you before we let everybody on, because it's been a little while, and appreciate everybody that's joined today. And as you can tell, kind of from what Christy shared, I've taken a little bit of a winding path in the profession from building a bunch of clinics to coaching others to do the same, and then intertwining compliance, not out of a love for compliance, but out of a love for the people that I coach, to make sure that, you know, when they generated a certain amount of revenue and a certain amount of impact, that they got to keep it and they didn't end up in trouble. And then next it was on to creating an outsourced billing company so we could allow doctors to really stay focused on serving people and their teams, focused on the patient experience and not getting caught up in all the changes with insurance. And then my current role, which is one of the partners and the director of business development with the HealthCore software. HealthCore is a software that's kind of intertwining all of the things that we're going to talk about with numbers today. Some of the principles and the concepts that we're talking about is really things we've used to take the HealthCore software to another level. If you were to go to our website, healthcoretech.com, you'd see that our focus has been to kind of move past this whole just efficient documentation. We're just going to be fast. We got the 5-second documentation. Yeah, that's important, and that's certainly part of HealthCore, or just a great billing software. We've been a great billing software for 20 years, but what we're trying to do is really take the software, instead of it just be kind of be this support tool, that it becomes this tool to help grow your business with analytics and data and information. And if you're wondering why I say it's been around for 20 years, if you're wondering why you've never heard of HealthCore, because for the last 20 years, it's been exclusive to just certain groups of chiropractors, certain big groups of successful chiropractors who are doing different things, growing multiple clinic chain, that type of thing. And then it was part of the exclusive to the Health Source franchise. So it's never been available to the general kind of population of chiropractors until now. And I'm super excited to be a partner, super excited to take something that's been a tool for me and bring it to the rest of the profession. I went through stages where I'm trying to grow businesses. I need to see a certain amount of information. I just couldn't see it. And over time, as this software evolved, not only did I become their consultant, I became a partner in that software, because it was the thing that helped me create these practices and help me coach other doctors to do the same. So, as the title says, growing your clinic by obsessing over your numbers. Sometimes, and Christy and I were talking about this before she let everybody in, sometimes titles of webinars can do one of two things. We try to think of, well, what most accurately represents the information that we're going to provide. That's important because we don't want to mislead somebody and it really doesn't apply to you and you've wasted half hour, 45 minutes of your time. But we also don't want to scare people away. And sometimes when you talk about growing your clinic, for some people, it could push them away where maybe their goal isn't to grow, but even if it's not to grow, what the things we're going to teach can help to create a more fulfilling, more impactful practice. But then the second part of that, the obsessing over your numbers part, obsessing usually has a negative connotation by itself. And quite honestly, some people hate numbers, and some just hate numbers in general, and some just hate their numbers. They hate looking at their numbers because they don't like what they see. They get depressed and they get kind of all up in their head about them, so they just stop looking with them in general. But when it comes right down to it, you guys took some time to be here. You took some time out of your day to sit through this, and I'm super grateful for that. But it also tells me in some way you want something different for your practice, for your life, or you wouldn't have taken the time to be there. And I think that's a great place to start, is thinking about your own why for being on this call. What is it that you're looking for? And you can't just say, well, I want to grow. And you said you can help me grow by obsessing over the numbers. Well, growth by itself isn't specific enough to really understand. There's lots of ways to grow. Many of them wouldn't necessarily make you happy. They wouldn't necessarily make you feel fulfilled. So what way do you want to grow? And you could be thinking, well, I just want to grow in impact. I want to serve more people, not even so much more patient visits. It's not, you recognize that you want to impact a larger percent of your community. It's not the money, it's not the lifestyle, even though some of that comes as a trade-off for that impact, or maybe it is about the money and the lifestyle. Maybe you do want more income, you want more financial security, and you need to grow to be able to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we shy away from, as doctors, saying, well, I want more money and I want more lifestyle, I want more wealth. There's not, because we think that that's greedy, and that's just not the case. That is part of business, is to have those returns. And the last thing is, maybe it's not about any of that. Maybe it's just about freedom. You've got the practice that you want, but it's got you so consumed because you're doing marketing events every weekend. You're never home with your family. Maybe it's about, how do I develop more freedom? And all of that can be accomplished through looking at your numbers, but possibly not all at one time. And certainly if you aren't thinking in terms of growth strategically, and you're just thinking, well, I'll just spin the hamster wheel harder and harder, you're not working very smart. And then your chances of actually achieving what it is that you're looking for is reduced substantially. So we're going to talk about using metrics to accomplish your goals. And no, just because we're talking about metrics doesn't mean that there's going to be a lot of math involved. In fact, there really shouldn't be any. Most of this information should be in your software, at least some of it, maybe not to the detail we're going to talk about, but most of it should be in your practice management software somewhere. And obviously, because I'm involved in the HealthCore software, the screenshots that we show will be from that software, but you can kind of adapt that to whatever software it is that you use. And I want to start with a reminder that, generally speaking, chiropractic clinics are a business just like any other business. They're a business just like any other business. And sometimes that's really, chiropractic's different. Chiropractic, it's got some nuances that are different, but in general, it's just another business. And sometimes that's why chiropractors struggle in practice and in business, is they've spent all this time learning how to take care of people. They've studied the anatomy and the physiology of the human body. They're learning how to give that perfect chiropractic adjustment and when not to. And that's all great. And yet I see all these really great doctors, incredibly studied in research, and they're great adjusters. And either they're broke or they're close to broke or they're out of business. And to me, that's just sad. All this potential to change the world or at least change their community, and they end up doing something else because they couldn't make it in practice, or they limp along and they have a fairly minor impact or less impact than they'd like and a fairly mediocre lifestyle. But there's a reason for that. Those things, the studying the research, the performing the adjustment, all of that's the technician part of chiropractic, or it's the art. I mean, you could say that too. I don't want to take away from it. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's the truth. And it's not just chiropractic. Same thing applies to dentists, the electricians, the plumbers, the accountants. They think just because I'm amazing at the technical side of the business that I should be successful at the business side. And that's just not how it works. And if any of you remember Michael Gerber wrote a book called E-Myth years ago. And I was fortunate enough to be in a group called Chiro Elite 20 plus years ago. And we had him come speak, and ultimately I joined his coaching program as well. And he refers to something called the entrepreneurial seizure, which is when a technician thinks that because they're good at the technical side of the business, that alone should equate to business success. And that's the myth. That seizure is the myth, which is just because you're good at the technical side doesn't make you good at the business side. And I saw a speaker one time talk about a continuum where the passionate, principled, focused chiropractors on one side of the continuum, all the way over, that's the one that's really into the art of chiropractic and the philosophy of it. And then clear on the other side is the business-minded chiropractor. He studies the numbers, he reviews financial statements, he thinks in terms of metrics and revenue streams and systems. And the speaker was saying we have to find that middle ground where we're equal parts passionate chiropractor and equal parts business owner. And I agree with that statement, but to me, the image of this continuum is where it kind of gets off. It almost indicates, well, I have to be less of one, kind of find my happy spot in the middle, and one takes away from the other. And that's not the case. In fact, I think constantly we should be working on both. How do we continue to elevate our passion for what we do and for what chiropractic can do in this world, and at the same time improve our business acumen to better take chiropractic to more people and have a massive impact? Because really chiropractic is no different than any of those other business, in that a majority of doctors and chiropractic business owners lose sight of the basic metric and math equation that covers every aspect of their business. And we think of statistics as these individual numbers, and we look at them each individually, and that's not really how it works. It's an equation. And Brad Sugars, who invented the idea of business coaching, or I don't know, at least I think he said that. I don't know if that's really true or not, but he refers to something called the business chassis. And that's basically what I want to talk about today, is the chiropractic version of that business chassis. And when he refers to that, he's talking about this basic equation to business success with profit at the bottom. Because that's really what a business is designed to do, is to provide value to a market and in exchange generate revenue that's greater than expenses to generate a profit, right? That is what a business is for. And his formula for business chassis looks like this. Leads, which is the people who have been exposed to your business, times the conversion rate. What percentage of those can we get in our business, equals our customers, times the number of transactions or the number of times they visit over a lifetime, times their average visit sale, equals the revenue, times the profit margin, equals the profit. Fairly simple. And I think you could look at this and say, wow, I just took a half hour out of my life to listen about this. That seems kind of a no-brainer. But that's the beauty of it, is it's amazing how little interest we put into this formula when it comes to strategically improving our practice to change our life. But let's look at this from a chiropractic standpoint. Instead of, not too many chiropractic clinics, unfortunately, are really tracking leads, and for that matter, have any kind of follow-up process whatsoever. If we do any active marketing, it tends to be more, if they're ready right now, great. If not, hopefully we cross paths at another time. So as much as I think that has to be something we improve on as a profession, where we're really using a CRM system and tracking leads, creating follow-ups, I'm going to skip over that part because I don't think too many of you are actually doing that. I'm going to focus on the next step in the process, which is prospects. And prospects are new people that show up to your office for a consultation or exam. And then conversion percentage is the percentage of those patients that convert to some kind of care plan. It gives you your true, actual new patients. And then, of course, if you multiply that times the number of visits that they have, the number of times that they come back to you, again, over a lifetime, which is actually in chiropractic is considered PVA, patient visit average. And then here comes the next difference. Normally we would take that times the sales. We would take that times the sales, but chiropractic's different. If in an auto parts store, if a customer comes in 5 times and they spend $100 on each visit, the revenue is $500. In chiropractic clinic, that isn't the case, right? Unless you have an all cash practice, and assuming you don't, instead of just new patients times PVA times your average charge per visit, you'd have an extra line in here that basically says times our collection percentage. And why is that? Because, you know, we have contracted fee schedules, we have write-offs, we don't always collect at the time of service, so we don't have 100% collection of the charge. So we got to have a collection percentage ultimately to get to our revenue. And hang in there, we're just laying some foundation for why all this matters. And then we're going to go back through the formula and we're going to talk about how each of these can be changed and see the potential that your practice has that's sitting in this formula. And no doubt when we go back to the top, we talk about prospects themselves. No doubt we can bring in more new patients. And for some of you, that's what you need to do. You know, if you've only got a few random new patients coming in each week, you're going to need to focus on how do I get out in the community, educate more people on the value of chiropractic and specifically the value your practice brings to that community. But then let's look at conversion percentage. And this is a number that, you know, sometimes it's talked in terms of practice management, but some of you have never talked about it at all. But when those prospects come in, what percentage of them actually convert to some care? In our software in the health core system, we use the third visit to indicate that. The third visit is the conversion visit. And the reason for that is it kind of covers all practices. If you're one that does a full 2-day new patient where one day they get consult, exam, and x-rays, second day they come back for a report and a financial report, it really is that third visit that indicates, okay, they have some kind of trust in the office that they're willing to take some care. May not take the whole care plan, but they're taking some. That's a conversion. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you have a PRN practice where kind of see people once and they call if they need you again, the first time or two that they come, they're just checking you out, seeing if they want to stay, seeing if you're going to provide value. So by visit 3, it indicates that, okay, they're sticking around, they're coming back when it's not better or it comes back again, and they're trusting in your office. So either way, that third visit is that conversion visit. So how do you know if this is an area that needs improvement? What's a good conversion percentage in your office? Well, obviously, we'd all like to have 100% conversion. If you have a PRN type practice, you should be shooting for 100% because you're not intimidating anybody with a plan. You know, what's going to get you a little less than 100% is there are going to be those people that just don't resonate with the doctor or resonate with the team or resonate with your practice philosophy. Maybe they want a care plan or they wanted x-rays or something that wasn't part of you, but the goal should at least be in the upper 90s. If you're recommending bigger plans of care with higher dollar services, you'd want this number to be more in the upper 70s, 80%. And that's just my opinion. The reason I say that is one of the biggest areas that doctors struggle, especially either newer doctors or those that kind of are financially kind of struggling to get over the hump and having some success, is they try to be everything to everybody. Instead of having a conviction about what they believe to be the best for the patient, they just waver at this first sign of confrontation. And they'll end up with a high conversion rate, but then the problems surface kind of down the road in this formula a little bit. So the number we use for people who recommend some care plan, you know, whether that's 12, 15, 20, 30, doesn't really matter, is in that 70%, like this top one. If you're, I'm not sure why it's doing that. If you're one that is like the bottom one, where you look at year to date, we're at 57%, 3-month average is 39%. You know, that should be a concern for you. It's bouncing back and forth. That should be a concern that we have some issues going on in the practice. And it's a great area to focus on. Instead of driving more new patients into the top of the funnel, we should be looking for how do we make sure that the people who are coming into our office as new patients really get the service and the experience they want. And some of the things that we can look at are appearance of the office, appearance and friendliness of the team, appearance and friendliness of the doctor. Kind of all those experience items are affecting how you're able to convert patients to a care plan or even PRN, get them to recognize that you're the place to go for the care. You know, most important is communication. How is the doctor and team communicating in a way that aligns with the patient's needs and the expectations with their care recommendations? All of that's going to affect our conversion percentage. And those are the things we should be talking about if we're looking at this statistic as a team and say, hey, we're doing a lot of marketing here, but look at these numbers. we're doing so much marketing, driving so many people in, we're not really paying attention to how our patients are doing with care, and we got a super low conversion rate. Let's go through this list and figure out where we can be better. And the last one is lead source. Where did these patients come from? And we think, well, that really shouldn't matter. That does matter. There is a difference. If you don't think so, look at the difference between a patient that comes in from a Google search and a patient who comes in from another patient referral. You'll see, here's just some sample data. These are referral new patients. They came from patient referrals, 67 of them for 629 visits, so a 9.4 per patient. Look at internet search. Actually, normally it's a bigger difference than this. 25 new patients for 169 visits, 6.8 visits. So that's a big, that's a 25% difference between the two of them and how they retain and how they stick around, assuming they, on average, were recommended the same amount of care. Like I said, usually the gap is even bigger than that. And then we can break that down into, hopefully your software has some marketing analysis in there where you can break that down into even a more micro level where different things you did, whether it's out in the community or it's through internet or social media, and you're looking at all those to look at and see, all right, well, what did we see on average and how many visits did they stick around for? Or did we just go out and spend a lot of money? We got low quality leads that didn't, and now we're just filling up the top of the funnel, bogging down our team and really not getting anybody what they're wanting, including the clinic itself. So the next number is the average number of time the patient returns. And again, this is an average over the lifetime of the patient. This isn't just about big care plans. It's about retention in general. Do they continue to return to your office when they need care? And PVA is obviously patient visit average is calculated by dividing total patient visits in a given period of time by the number of converted new patients. And sometimes I see people looking at this as a weekly or monthly statistics. It really doesn't have much value until you get out to a 3-month average. In a time period as short as a month, and this one's a good example, you can have if this month we had a crappy new patient month, so our denominator is small, but yeah, we had a good patient visit month because we had decent new patients last year, you're going to have a number that looks like this, 219 as a patient visit average. Obviously, that's through the roof, and it's artificially escalated because we had a crappy new patient month this one, which is why I tell people use your 3-month average to determine what's our true retention of patients in the office. And again, this one needs to be broken down into what can we do? What are the factors that go into this? Certainly recommended care plans is one of the things. And I'm not suggesting you go out and recommend more care to increase a statistic just to increase profits. That should only be done if you understand clinically how that will benefit the patient, or if for some reason your poverty complex has kept you recommending small care plans, even though you don't feel like you're really making structural changes. That would be another reason that you would want to increase that. If you do it for any other reason, you will fail. You just aren't going to have the conviction to effectively communicate the plan to the patient. You just aren't. I'm not saying nobody can. There are all kinds of scammers and charlatans in any industry that can sell anything, and they don't really have to believe in it. They'll just try to scam you. But I'm assuming you're not, those people aren't on this call. You will fail if you don't have the conviction for the care plans that you recommend. So let's assume that you're recommending what you believe to be the best. Then the other ways of changing the PVA number is with retention. And if we look at some analytics in the health core system, we can look at what we call PE1 and PE2, which PE1 is about 12 visits and PE2 is about 18, 20. And I don't remember which right off the top of my head, but those are relatively arbitrary numbers. But if we take a step back and we say, let's say our average care plan is 20, 24 visits, and these are your statistics where 38% of the people are making it to PE1, we have a problem. Because we're barely getting 1/3 of the people to the care that we recommend. We have some issues. If on average our care plan is 12, we still have some problems. It's not as big of a problem if we're at 38%. So we have to look at these numbers in context of what we're recommending for care, and then trying to figure out, all right, why aren't they getting to the first progress exam? If my average care plan is 18 visits, they're not even making it to 12. It could be a lot of things. It could be a communication problem in the report where we aren't setting the expectation. We're either setting a too high of an expectation or we're not setting it at all. It could be crappy daily visit communication. All we do is talk about the weather. Potentially, it could be we need to work on our adjusting. Either patients are uncomfortable with our adjustment, or we're just not getting good results. Sometimes we do have to go back to technique and refine our craft. But if we are getting a good conversion rate and 80% are making it to PE1, and suddenly PE2 is 20%, and yet we have a decent care plan that we're recommending, now we got to look at something else. Well, like maybe our progress exams communication is lacking. We just don't do an effective job of communicating about care beyond pain, if that's important for you, which ultimately leads into one other thing, which is on the bottom, you can see the wellness percentage. In this office, 55% or 56% of their adjustments are wellness adjustments, which is two things. It means they're keeping people around for the wellness plan. It means their documentation is much, much easier because it doesn't take as much documentation, so they're able to get through the notes faster. It just has created a better life, but they've done that by working on various steps of this retention process. The next step in there is average visit charges, and what are we charging per visit on average, which is our basically AVS, average visit services. And it would be easy to say, let's jump right over this and go to average visit income. What do we collect per visit? Because that's most important. But if we do this, we miss a lot of areas for growth that we could be looking at ideas for how we get better. And no doubt it starts with the services we provide. And if you're a straight chiropractic clinic, it is what it is. Then the only change you can make is going from insurance-based to cash-based. And then obviously your average visit service and average visit income would be equal because you collect everything up front or at time of service. And we have 100% collection rate. But if you're not straight chiro and you're offering other services or would like to, there's a whole variety of factors at this level, at this part of the equation that we can look at. We could start by doing a fee analysis. There's services that provide that fee analysis to make sure we're charging appropriately for what we do. We can evaluate how each code is being paid by the carriers and make sure that there aren't other services that would provide the same effect, but maybe reimbursed more appropriately for what we deserve. This isn't a great example because they're not apples to apples. They're not going to reach similar therapeutic goals. But if we look at this 97035, we can go down the right and see, for a $28 service, we're getting paid about 14. So already we're at a 14% collection rate. So we've got some issues. But the other thing to think about, ultrasound, which is an attended service, meaning somebody from your team or the doctor's got to sit there and rub the ultrasound, and we're getting paid $14 for that time. You compare that to something like 97110, and in this case, we're charging $45 a unit. We're getting paid in that $25, $30 a unit range for that same amount of time for that same therapist. That's something that has to be considered. Again, somebody's going to challenge me and say, yeah, but those aren't for the exact same therapeutic reasons. I get that. I'm just using this as an example of one of the things that you're going to need to look at and evaluate in terms of your charges for your clinic as we move through this formula. And then that also goes into your collection percentage. So if we look at some of the financial analytics in the HealthCore software, over to the right, you can see, let's see if we got some arrows. We got gross collection percentage and net collection percentage. Gross collection is what percent of our total charges are we collecting, and this is affected by a lot of things. So it's affected by the fee schedules we use. If we have a really high standard fee schedule and yet we're in a lot of networks like Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare, this percentage is just bound to be lower, and sometimes it's even lower than 50%. That's okay. It's somewhat controlled by your billing system, but it's also somewhat controlled by the services you choose to provide and what networks you're in. But on the other side, the net collection percentage is the percentage we collect out of what's possible to collect. And this is a more direct indicator of how is our revenue cycle management system doing? How is our billing team doing? Because, if you look at this, some of that Medicare, 90%, it should be pretty close to 100. Blue Cross should be pretty close to 100 because, it's already factoring in that the fee schedule adjustments or the contract write-offs and those types of things already factored in. This all should be very, very close to 100. And you can see in this case, if not, we have some things that we should be looking at. This is an area that we can improve versus just hammering on more new patients to build the business. There's a lot of business that can be built right in through here. And then if you look at some of the numbers of, at the top of 39, well, I'll get into the patient statements in a minute, but average days in AR, for Blue Cross Blue Shield should be about 45 days. We're looking at 175, almost 6 months on average to collect Blue Cross, 159 days in Medicare. Both of those should be in the 45-day range. So it should take 6 weeks or so at the most to collect from those if we're sending out the right claims and we're following up like we should be. So we know we have some insurance follow-up issues, could have some coding and credentialing issues as well. This needs to be the focus for this clinic before anything else, or we're just working harder and harder and harder and not getting anything in return. And then, as I mentioned, on the patient side, if our patient AR is getting higher, we either aren't doing a good insurance verification or we aren't establishing agreement with the patient at the financial report on how they're going to deal with their financial responsibilities. Everything's getting pushed to the patient statement, which is that 39 at the top. And this goes either two ways. The first mistake, you either aren't sending them at all because the accounts are so messed up, no one trusts them, and everyone's in office afraid of the backlash when we finally send these out. And then there's the other end of the statement perspective, which is you have no problem sending statements. You send hundreds of them over and over and over, and no system to actually collect the money. We're sending statements with cash services on it, products on there, wellness, all of these things that should be collected at the time of service over the counter or just getting pushed to statements. We send a statement today, and tomorrow the patient comes in and nobody says a word to them about paying. All of these issues cause your AR to be much higher than it should be, and your average visit income and your collection percentage to be much lower. So it's affecting that formula and the bottom line of the formula. And that's an area that you can really focus on. RCM systems, it's a webinar of its own. I just wanted to show you how it's important in this formula to break down all the steps. And I have this slide that I jumped to before. If you're having issues with that, Brandy Brimhall, somebody to me, she's the go-to person for this type of stuff. If you're not sure, is my billing system good? Is it bad? I can't really tell. I want somebody to go through my stuff. I need to teach my billing. She's the person to reach out to. In fact, I'm a compliance and a revenue cycle expert. And when I have a question, I go to Brandy. So she's my go-to person. So I threw that in there just in case that's an area that you see as a challenge. Her and I created a training program at the Billing Connection together to really help plug that hole in the chiropractic profession. But if we go back to this where we started with the original formula and we think about all of the different elements to create a profitable practice, it'd be easy to get overwhelmed and think, oh my God, there's so many things to work on. Instead, I want you to think about the practice you want to create and how you want to create it. That depending on how you want to practice and your philosophy of care, there are certain elements of this equation that are fixed rather than variable, meaning you just might not be able to do anything about it. That's why it's great that there's a lot of steps in the formula. If you're a straight chiro office that wants to be insurance-based, for the most part, you can't do much about your average visit charge. You're kind of subject to the 98940 and what the insurance company is. That's just the way it is. So your focus has to be on communicating care plans and retention and ultimately over-the-counter collections and insurance follow-up. So there's very specific parts of this formula that you're going to be able to focus on for your practice. If you're a doctor that doesn't believe in providing care plan at all and everything's PRN follow-up, well, then you're going to have to focus more on the top of the funnel in terms of new patients coming in and how we're converting those to some kind of care that we're the place to go back to. And for me, I was in a town of 3,500, 5 chiros, 3,500 people, 5 chiros. So the idea of building this $1 million practice by generating 40, 50 new patients a month, it's not going to happen. Do the math. I would run out of patients. And then on the other hand, I wasn't a CBP doctor, so I didn't have the rationale and the clinical mindset to do care plans that large. But what I did know was the importance of communicating them to through a care plan onto wellness and regular chiropractic adjustments. So that was our focus on communication, creating a great experience for them that they wanted to continue on their wellness care forever. Didn't have a super high average visit service. I only had 18 to 20 new patients a month, but yet we built a huge practice without spending a lot of time and money on marketing by focusing on specific parts of this equation. And the key for you guys is to figure out what you want to do, figure out your own why, and then think through this formula and decide what's the next thing for you and your team. What's the next thing that you can focus on in Q4 to move you in that direction? And once you know what metric to improve, then have a team meeting and brainstorm, what are all the things we could focus on? Oops, sorry. What are all the things we could focus on to get there? And what's specific out of those 2, 3, or 4? Because you can't focus on them all. What are we going to focus on? Our recommendations, on our communication, on our daily communication on the treatment table, on our collections process. What are we going to do as a team? And then monitor those numbers. And I show this on this screen. This is this is the Health Core dashboard. If you see over on the right, that's the scoreboard. And for me, when I think of obsessing about numbers, for me, when I was in practice and growing clinics, it was multiple times a day looking at numbers and figuring out, are the things we're changing, are they making a difference? And that's what that scoreboard's for, is choosing from 30, 40 different statistics and finding the ones that are important to the part of this equation that we're talking about that are important to your practice, and then teeing them up in front of everybody so everybody on the team is in line and obsessively monitoring these analytics to determine if things are working. And so really I know I'm kind of going long on time, kind of the gist of this was, and we talked fast through some of the numbers and some of the equation stuff. It was really more of an overall concept of saying it's a linear formula, and each part of that formula can be adjusted and can be tweaked and can be focused on. And each part of that has specific things that can be worked on to be able to improve your practice. You just have to figure out what those specific things are. And if software is your issue and you're looking for this type of thing and it's not available in the software you have, I'm putting the information up. There's a QR code. If you use those, go to book.healthcore.tech. I'll jump on. It says full demo, but there's also just a phone call with me if that's what you want. And we just talk about numbers and talk about how to get you where you want to go and practice. And sometimes people get stuck in their software system. They hate their software system and their support is crappy, but change is painful, and change is always painful, and they'll stick with it despite all those frustrations, because they don't want to change and they don't want to have to start over in a new software system. We spent tons of time making it so you can convert your data, depending on the software, especially if you have a server-based software. A lot of those, we can convert all of your financial information into the software where you pick up almost like you've always been in our software, and you don't have that reset button. So there's an opportunity to make a change that's not as painful, and that's something we can talk about as well. But guys, I appreciate your time. If there's any questions, drb@healthcoretech.com is my email address. I think it was on this page here. I'm happy to answer it, even if it's not about software and you don't want to change softwares. I care about this profession. I care about this profession continuing to grow. I care about the people that are in this profession getting the rewards that they deserve for the impact they have. And if there's anything I can help you with, just reach out to me. I'd be glad to help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bergquist. I love that you just talked about the fact that change is painful, because I think it's funny. I'm a big fan of change in theory. I spent an entire year begging Dr. Foxworth for new software, not understanding in all of the demos that we did for that software that I was going to have to give up my PC, the MacBook tomorrow. And one day I came into my office, the PC was gone, the MacBook was set up, and there was a sticky note and it said, "It's tomorrow, smile."
Love it. Yeah, Danny Drubin told me one time, he was my coach many years ago, and told me that you're either in the pain or you're in the pain. You're either in the pain of staying the same, being same frustrations, or you're in the pain of change and moving on to better things. And I've followed that as well, but sometimes it's hard.
It is. Sometimes it is hard. And it's like, you're like, oh, this is just going to be so tough. And you let that hold you back. And the reality is it's already tough, or you wouldn't be thinking about making a change to begin with or doing something different. And thank you so much. That's like the whole thing we were talking about before we got started is it's just monitoring and looking at your numbers on a regular basis will show improvement without much change on your team. And we were talking about how impactful that's been for even our company. When we were still in the office, we had a 70-inch TV screen in all of the rooms where our teams were working that showed their numbers that would update. And all day long, you would watch your numbers go up and down and see how effective things were and make adjustments to what we were doing based on those 6, 7 years ago. That is first time they showed us those numbers. Man, we didn't just hit those numbers. We blew them out of the water, and we achieved so much more than we ever thought possible. And all it did was put those numbers in front of us. We were always capable of achieving them. We just needed something to keep us focused on moving forward.
Agreed. Yeah, as we talked about before, there's so many doctors and teams who just want to avoid the numbers because they're a passionate chiropractor and they just want to take care of people, and that's what I want to do. That's okay. The numbers don't take away. The numbers add to that. The numbers are like it or not, the numbers are a representation of the impact that you're having and the difference you're making in the world. That's just reality, and you can't shy away from it. Shying away from it's not going to get you anything different. Focusing on it, you can still focus on when I'm with patients or when I was with patients, I'm focused on a great chiropractic adjustment. I'm focused on their nervous system. I'm focused on communicating health and wellness and all those things. But I also had CEO time, which was the time that I would sit down.
Patient experience and have wonderful outcomes. If you think about even in your documentation, it always comes down to the numbers. What are the goals? What are they trying to achieve? How successful are they getting there? And your ability to make adjustments along the way, no pun intended, to get them to where they need to be. So it's really no different when you think about your practice. The more successful you are, the longer you're going to be there to take care of your community and give them the best chiropractic care.
100% agree. But thank you so much, Christy, for having me on. It's always great to reconnect with you and the great things that you guys are doing at ChiroHealthUSA. Recommend it for everybody I work with because it just makes life, well, first of all, it makes life compliant, but it just makes life easy, and super appreciate what you guys do for the profession as well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bergquist. And we are always so excited when we are able to have amazing speakers like you take time into your busy days to talk with our audience. And I just want to remind everybody, we're going to be talking about the most expensive documentation mistakes chiropractors are making in 2022. Associate, if you are a student and you're looking for a job, or you're an associate looking for a job, maybe you're wanting to relocate to another state, this is a great opportunity. And they'll be hosting 2 webinars next week, one on how to get hired 101 for students who are interviewing for potential associateships. And if you're a doctor who's thinking about hiring an associate, how to find the best associate for your practice, because not just any doctor will do. So I hope you'll check those out at ChiroHealthUSA.com/webinars. We look forward to seeing you here next week.